Let's start with long tail cast on. This is the classic way to start the knitting. I have in-depth tutorial on my channel. I will leave you the link in the description and also in the suggestions. Do some cast on stitches using long tail cast on method. Let's say this is enough. In continental style, the working needle we hold in the right hand, and the working yarn we are holding on in the left hand. I will show how I do the continental knitting in order to get even tension, and the biggest problem is it with the purl stitches. So how I do the tension, I just slip the working yarn around my index finger and I leave it hanging like this way, and I'm using a pinch grip, which is basically with all four, the rest of the 3 fingers I am putting against the needle, and the setup looks like this. So here is over the index finger the working yarn, the rest is just hanging down, but the tension is created because I keep all the yarn tail sort of in between my hand and the needle, and this is my pinch grip. So the setup is like this. So I take my other knitting needle. Normally what you do is you just slip the first stitch, and we start with the purls, because when you turn your knitting you can see that this actually should be a purl row. So when you do the purl, the working yarn in classic continental knitting, you have to move it forward, and you put the knitting needle purlwise in the stitch, and now what you have to do is really this funny spiral type grabbing of the working yarn, like you go under the bows and you turn this way and you like pinch the working yarn, and you have to get it back through the loop, and you've done your first continental style purl. But you always have to look this way when you are grabbing the yarn. Then the stitch which you made, the right leg of the stitch always come in front of the needle, and the left leg is always behind, so they are not twisted. So this way you know they are not twisted, and this basically it is what you try to achieve when you move forward and you put the knitting needle into the stitch. So, and you grab the working yarn and you get it back through the loop, and you have another purl. At the end of the video I will show you the Norwegian style purl, where actually the working yarn always stays behind, so it is much more comfortable, because I knit Norwegian style, and for me this move, when you have to move the yarn back and forth when you are purling, especially when you are do ribbing, it's not very comfortable. In order to keep the tension even, because in continental style knitting you will come up with the problem that the purl stitches are looser than the knit stitches, so you have to keep all the stitches close as to the needle tips as possible, because you are doing this tiny movement, and by the time when you so the stitches are actually created on these tips, which are a little bit thinner than the rest of the needle. So you see, like really it is small movement, and by the time the stitch you slide over to the needle, they become all the same tension. You can, and sometimes I do the tug. This tug is such invisible once you get used to it, so it will not slow you down. So I will show you one more time the classic continental style. You bring yarn forward, you put the knitting needle purlwise into the stitch, and then you do like this, you grab it and you bring back through the stitch and pass it onto the right hand needle. The knit stitch is pretty straightforward. I have the same setup, pinch grip. The working yarn is around the index finger, and the rest I just push against the needle this way. And the first stitch we slip usually, and now we are ready for our knit stitch. We just put the needle knitwise into the stitch, and we just basically just grab the working yarn. This is very easy. Put into the stitch knitwise, and you see I'm just actually grabbing the yarn as it comes. And also for keeping tension, also do as little movement as possible and working on the needle tips really fast. Norwegian purls. Norwegian style knitting is just a variation of continental style because the setup is the same. So first stitch we slip. Now we don't have to move yarn in front. The yarn stays at the back. The thing is, now we need to, with needle, go under the working yarn and into the stitch purlwise, and I stretch a little bit the stitch, and then I need to wrap around, but actually I scoop sort of the working yarn onto the right needle and I move back. And the stitch looks absolutely the same, just in my opinion, this little bit less confusion. So the yarn is at the back. I go under both working yarn and into the stitch purlwise, and I sort of scoop the working yarn on the needle and go back again under both, and I need just to wrap around the working yarn around the needle and immediately go back. So this way there's even less motions and it's much faster because you don't have to do this movement. I'll show you one more time. Under both, stretch a little bit, grab the working yarn, wrap it around the needle tip and move back through the stitch. Just I'm showing a little bit looser. So I don't do this movement with the hand, with the finger in there, just in order to show you how actually it is done. So I move and I have to grab the working yarn, and the stitch again is lying straight. Once you get used to it and practice, it will be so easy because you're working only on the fingertips. You don't do these big motions. This style of knitting is very good for people who has some joint problems or muscle aches from the knitting. This could be the way to go for them. The cast off is very similar, just slip, knit and pass stitch slipped over. Now we cast off one stitch, we knit the next and pass the stitch over, knit the next and pass stitch over. You will have this braid looking cast off. If you want the cast off look the same as a cast on, there is on my channel the needle bind off by Elizabeth Zimmerman. It looks exactly as a long tail cast on. So this is my scarf, ribbing 2x2, and I'm knitting this Continental style and Norwegian variation. In practice it looks like this. I have my knit stitch, put the knitting needle into the stitch. I have my working yarn here, I just grab, that's it. Again I put into the stitch, grab my working yarn, that's it. And I don't move the yarn in front, I just do under both working yarn and into the stitch purlwise, stretch a little bit, grab, scoop, wrap around, call it as you want, around the needle tip, and I move back. And this is my purl. And again. And now 2 knit stitches. And as you see, my working yarn is always at the back. I keep all my stitches close to the needle tips because I want to the stitches create on this thinner part of the needle. I think it's just much smoother experience. You can try this. Thank you for watching this video. Please press like button and subscribe to my channel not to miss any new videos. In this way I know that I will have to post maybe more videos about different topics. But until then, I just say goodbye and I see you in my next videos.